Hi guys, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to our channel. And in this video, I'm going to discuss about Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, threat and vulnerability management, security recommendation, and remediation actions. Now, if you're watching the series from the beginning, in the last video, we have discussed about weaknesses section, whereas the core agenda of this video will be knowing what is security recommendation, how are security recommendations listed for softwares and devices, how security recommendations have respective remediation actions defined, how to request a remediation action, how to add an exception, and how to report inaccuracy. Now, this video will be a longer video comparatively to what I have been posting for this particular playlist because there is a lot more content that I'm going to cover in this particular video. Now, I would like to start off with a statement, and that is just detecting vulnerabilities or weaknesses is not enough. You must have an organized process or workflow to remediate discovered vulnerabilities. And that's the reason why most of the security practices ideate to detect and respond capabilities. Now, relate this with an example, which is, let's say you have all the right set of tools that are helping you to discover the weaknesses and vulnerabilities that exist in your enterprise. But then the question is, what's next? I mean, is there a typical process or a workflow that can help you remediate those vulnerabilities which have been discovered? So think about security recommendations and remediation actions as your next steps that you have to take in order to remediate discovered vulnerabilities. So if you will recall what we were discussing in our last video, that if we talk about weakness section, it is actually a kind of a console that is going to list all the weaknesses that exist in your enterprise or that affects your organization, right? If I go ahead and click on this option of weakness, all the CVEs which have been detected in my enterprise will get listed over here. But then the question is, what's next? How should I go ahead and remediate those weaknesses? Now you can just go ahead and randomly click on any CVE which is getting listed over here. And then if you'll go at the right hand side bottom, you are getting this option of go to related security recommendation. That means for every weakness that has been discovered in your enterprise, there will be a specific recommendation actions. Okay. Now, the moment I will click on this recommendation, I will be routed to this console here or this option, and then I can go ahead and create a remediation action for this. Okay. Now relate this. Weakness section is letting you know what has been discovered. Security recommendation is letting you know what should be done. Okay, so if you will see this recommendation, it says update Microsoft Windows Server 2019 OS and built-in application. And if I'll go ahead and update this particular OS, it is actually going to resolve or remediate 801 associated CVEs. Okay. So relate this. It's very simple, to be very precise, that weakness section will let you know what has been discovered. Security recommendation will let you know what should be done. And remediation action is something that is going to let you know how it should be done and who is responsible for executing a specific task. Now, let me explain this particular section with one more exceptionally relatable example, and that is if I talk about the typical layout of a specific enterprise, or mostly all of the enterprise follow the same layout, that security teams are different and IT team, the actual team who is going to implement the changes on the ground or who are actually going to create policies, they are two different teams altogether. Now, the purpose of security team is to go ahead and discover all the vulnerabilities, to be very precise, by using the right set of tools, and then let the IT team know that for which application there are certain vulnerabilities which exist, and that can be resolved if we go ahead and update that particular software, or let's say upgrade that software. Okay, so if you are a security admin, let's say, then you will be using MDE portal to discover all the vulnerabilities, follow security recommendation, and then assign a remediation task to your IT team. Now, let's say you are a part of IT team and MDE is getting used in your enterprise, then precisely the task that you are getting in your ITSM tool, or let's say in Endpoint Manager, is basically initiated by somebody who's a part of security team. Okay, now this is the basic layout, or you can say that this is the idea behind the backing statement, which says that remediation actions, or MDE to be very precise, can help you bridge in the gap between the security team and the IT team, because both of them can work on the same console and they can go ahead and check what's exactly going on, where exactly the task status is for now, whether somebody has taken the ownership from the IT team or not, or it is closed or not. Just in a hypothetical overview of how exactly this works. Now, when it comes to these three different stages, let me make things more clear in terms of what all could be the possibility of the respective set of information which is getting displayed. Now, if I talk about MDE, if I talk about Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, if I talk about weaknesses section that exist on this particular console, this is basically a list of all the CVEs which are there in your environment and that have to be remediated, or that has to be resolved, to be very precise. But when we talk about weakness or vulnerability, relate this, it is exceptionally simple that it's not only about CVE. There can be misconfigurations as well, right? There can be some baselining that can be done for a specific build of OS or for a specific application. And then those steps are actually going to improve the overall security posture of your enterprise, right? And that's the reason why I have mentioned both of these as weakness and vulnerability. But when we talk about MDE, it is not going to list misconfigurations here, but it is going to list the configuration change that can be implemented in the form of security recommendation. Because what we have to relate, that when we talk about vulnerability management, the purpose of vulnerability management is to go ahead and discover CVEs, right? Or to go ahead and discover weaknesses for applications, or let's say operating systems. But when we talk about security recommendation, this can be a combination of different services which MDE has to offer, right? And that's the reason if you will see this particular section of related component, I am getting a recommendation for ASR rules. For example, I am getting a recommendation for EDR. I'm also getting a recommendation for antivirus capability. I'm also getting a recommendation for application control. I mean, security recommendation has a very broader scope apart from just going ahead and fixing CVEs. That's the kind of a message which I wanted to convey by showing you all these options. Okay. Now let's come back and see that what could be the possibilities, or what type of security recommendations can be listed on the console. Now, if I talk about CVEs to be very precise, it can be fixed, let's say by software update or software upgrade, or let's say there is a specific application which is not adhering to any of the security or compliance standard defined. Then in that case, you may go ahead and search for a different alternative for that, right? A typical use case of a CASB solution in Microsoft world, it's Microsoft Cloud App Security, that can help you know what all security and compliance standard a specific application is adhering to, right? And there are scenarios wherein you will take a call, or you will decide that if this application is not going to improve its own security and compliance footprints, that I'm going to replace this. I'm just talking about based on my experience in terms of seeing how things are working. And then if I talk about misconfiguration, to be very precise, you'll go ahead and implement the configuration change. So let's say there is certain hardening that can be implemented and it does not exist in your enterprise. Then in that case, this security recommendation action can actually show you all the configuration changes that can be implemented for your enterprise, and that is somewhere or the other related to improving your security posture, right? So most of these recommendations are typically related to, again, ASR, exploit guard, credential guard. If you will relate this, these are different capabilities which MDE has to offer. But to make it more relatable, though recommendation is getting listed under vulnerability management, but it's not only about CVEs. The scope is exceptionally broader, and it is going to show you the list of all the recommendations that can be implemented. Now, let's say you know what has been discovered and you know what should be done. The next step is how it should be done and who should be responsible for that. Now, as I've said before, that for every weakness, there is a specific recommendation, and for every recommendation, there will be a specific remediation action. So now if I'll come back to my console, and if I'll click on any of this particular recommendation that I'm getting, I can actually go ahead and create a remediation action for this, which I will be showing you in a lot more detail. Okay, to be very precise, the set of options which are available for remediation actions, it is actually going to give you a summary of what has to be done. I mean, what exactly the impact, what exactly the changes you should implement. So for example, this security recommendation is actually asking me to go ahead and implement a specific ASR rule. Now, it can be done either through group policy object or MDM. The moment I'll click on this, I'll be routed to the respective documentation that I can go ahead and read and then implement these changes. Okay. Now, let's say you are using Microsoft Intune as well. In that case, when I'll click on request remediation action, I will be directly getting this option of opening a ticket in MDM. But let's say you are not using Microsoft Intune. In that case, you can actually go ahead and just download this entire list, or you can go ahead and download the entire dump of remediation actions and work on those typical reports. Or if you want, you can actually go ahead and query these tasks from APIs as well. I will be showing you everything in a lot more detail, but this is a sort of overview in terms of what all is possible by a specific category of option which is available on the console. Now let's go ahead and take one more step ahead in terms of understanding how the entire architecture is working on the portal itself. Okay. For every weakness that exists in your enterprise, there will be a specific recommendation action. And for every recommendation, there will be a specific remediation action that can be implemented. But then there are possibilities wherein multiple weaknesses or multiple CVEs will be addressed by one single recommendation. And for that recommendation, you can go ahead and create a remediation action. Now, what do I mean by this? Relate this with an example that for a specific build of Windows 10, if you will apply this particular security update, let's say 20, 30 different CVEs will get addressed. I'm just giving you an example. In this scenario, though it's a single recommendation, but it is actually going to cater n number of weaknesses or some weaknesses which exist in your enterprise. Okay, so just to summarize, every weakness will have a specific recommendation, and every recommendation will be mapped to a specific remediation action. Whereas for multiple weaknesses, there will be a recommendation for which a specific remediation action can be created. Now let me show you this on the console, and then things will make a lot more sense. So as of now, I'm in the recommendation section of security.microsoft.com, and as you can see, all the recommendations are getting listed over here. But what you will see that for some recommendation, the weakness count is 75. That means if I'll go ahead and apply this particular update, then almost 75 CVEs will be addressed. Okay, but if you'll go back to weakness section, where all the CVEs are getting listed individually for every CVE or for every weakness, you are getting this option of go to related security recommendation. That's how it is. So just a recap again from the portal itself, for every weakness, there will be an associated security recommendation. And for every security recommendation, you can actually go ahead and create remediation activities. Okay. Now let's go ahead and see each and every option that's available on the console. Okay. Now this is something which I cover in each of my video that's related to MDE, and that is this set of information which will be displayed to you is directly dependent upon the kind of access that you have. Okay, so let's say, for example, you are global admin, which I am right now for this particular tenant, and once I'm signed in, I am getting a view of all the recommendations that exist in my enterprise. Or relate this with a backing statement, that is, I am getting the org view because all these devices are selected. But let's say I was a part of a custom role wherein I should only be able to view the security related to NA region endpoints. Now, the moment I will click on apply, you can see this list has been changed. Initially, I was getting 75 recommendations and now I am getting only 32. Okay, so this is very important, and this is very basic as well. So make sure while working on security recommendation, you should be able to figure out that, you know, what kind of view you are getting and what will be your scope in terms of fixing the vulnerabilities for the enterprise. Okay. Now, if I talk about these columns, if you want to customize this view, you can just go ahead and click on customize columns, and then you can go ahead and select all these options and then click on apply. That's it. Now, this is the full blown view of whatever set of options which are available that can be viewed on the console. Okay. Now let's talk about each and every column that's coming in here. The first one is just a quick summary in terms of what exactly you have to do. Then the OS platform, then the associated CVEs, as I've shown you before, then the related component, whether there are any breach in sight or threat in sight, then exposed devices. Now this view, or this very small graph to be very precise, or a progress bar to be very precise, will maybe turn into green the moment you fix any of these recommendations which are coming here. Then it is showing you the status, whether the remediation is required or not, whether it has been started or not. I mean, different options will come here. And then the remediation type. Now, if you will relate the set of options which are coming here compared to what I was showing you before in the deck, things will make a lot more sense. Okay. So if you remember when I was talking about security recommendation, I precisely said that it can be either software update, upgrade, uninstall, or configuration change. And now if you'll come back to this particular console, for remediation type, if I'll go ahead and check for applying filters, you can see software update, upgrade, uninstall, or configuration change. Okay. Now the next one is device onboarding status, which is very relatable. Remediation activities, how many of them are actually active or pending or initiated or not. And then the impact, the utmost important column that you have to keep in mind, that there can be n number of weaknesses, there can be n number of configuration change that you can implement, but then there should be a prioritized list for that as well, right? And if you will scroll down this particular list, you will see this value is getting decreased. So think about this list as the prioritized recommendation that you should go ahead and implement. Then exposed device after exception, if you are adding any, and impact after exception, if you are adding any. The last one is very common, which is tags, which is going to make it more relatable in terms of which digital state or what kind of recommendation or what kind of vulnerabilities is actually associated with a specific recommendation that you're getting over here. Okay, now let's talk about all the options that can be seen or that can be checked for a specific security recommendation. Okay, now I'm just going to click on this particular one. Obviously there will be a flyout on the right, and it is actually going to show you all the details which are related to this particular recommendation. Most of the information will already be available over here. So likewise, if I talk about exposed device, it is listed over here. It's just that this particular console is also going to show you some more details which are very much important. Okay, now on how many devices it has been installed, and then the associated CVE list. I mean the entire list of different CVEs which will be resolved or which will be remediated the moment you'll go ahead and fix or apply this particular security recommendation. So these are the different set of options which are available. If I'll click on open software page, this is something which I've already shown you guys when we were talking about software inventory. For every application or for every software, you can actually go ahead and check for security recommendations, and then you can actually go ahead and check for discovered vulnerabilities as well. Okay, so now let's come back to my recommendation section. The only option which is left now is the filter. I can click on this and apply different filters altogether. And if I talk about related components, to be very precise, you can see that it is actually showing me a list of different set of filters that can be applied for, let's say, OS or for security controls. Now, the moment I'll click on security controls, it is actually asking me to apply a filter for a specific service which MDE has to offer. And as I've said before, that when we talk about security recommendation, it's not only about fixing CVEs, it's about rest of the capabilities or all the other capabilities which MDE has to offer. Then OS platform onboarding status. I mean, you can go ahead and apply any filter, whatever you want. Okay. So this was basically knowing all the details related to security recommendation. Let's just quickly check how our security recommendations listed for softwares and devices. So for software, I think majorly I have already covered by showing you after clicking on open software page. But still, the process will be same. You can just click on open software page for any of the application that exists in your enterprise. And then you can go ahead and click on security recommendation. Just one more use case that I can let you know here. And that is, let's say you're working with a specific application vendor and you're letting them know again and again that, see, these are all the weaknesses that exist for your particular application. And I'm getting these many recommendations. Can you go ahead and see if there are any that you can fix at the app layer itself? I mean, just an example to make it more relatable. Okay. Now, if I talk about how it is listed for devices, then you have to go to the device inventory section, click on any of these devices, and then again, click on security recommendations. You'll come to know the security recommendation for each and every device that exists in your enterprise. Now, the next thing that I would like to talk about is how security recommendations have respective remediation actions defined. So for that, I'll come back to my recommendation section, and then I'm just going to choose any of the security recommendation that is getting listed over here. Let's take an example of update Microsoft Windows Server 2019 OS built-in applications. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on request remediation. Now, what you can also do is before requesting a remediation action, just go ahead and check all the details and see whether you are getting the right set of information or not. Because once you request a remediation action, there will be a specific task which is created, and then the respective team members can work on it. Now, before I go ahead and request a remediation, let me quickly sign into endpoint.microsoft.com and let me navigate to the security task option that comes on the Endpoint Manager portal itself, so that I can precisely show you that where exactly that task will get listed if you are using MDE and Intune both. Okay, so to view the tasks which are initiated by MDE portal and then get routed to Endpoint Manager portal, this is the place where you have to go. So sign into endpoint.microsoft.com, go to endpoint security, and then click on security task. And as you can see, for now, there are only 3 tasks which are getting listed over here, and there is no task which is related to server. Okay, so now I'm going to click on request remediation. Now, if you guys remember, the same set of options which we were discussing, right? Software update or uninstall or action required. Let's say I'm going to click on software update. Again, this is something that you can choose depending upon the input that you are getting in the security recommendation section. And then click on this option which says open a ticket in Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Now, remediation due date is something that you can define. Let's say it's a server upgrade. It can be there can be a possibility that there are n number of other resources which are dependent on this particular server. So let's hypothetically assume that it's going to be fixed in a week or so. Then I'm going to define the priority. Let's say it's a high priority task that has to be resolved. And then I would say let's remediate ASAP, for example, just to make it, more relatable. And then I'm going to click on next. Now, again, if you want, you can also export this into a CSV, but for me, it's not required because I have MDE as well as Microsoft Intune. So I can actually use either of these portals to go ahead and check what's exactly going wrong if there is any miscommunication. Okay. And then I'll click on done. Or if you want, you can also click on this option which says track remediation activity progress, which is basically something that will get listed in the remediation section itself. So this is the one which we have just created. And as you can see, it is showing me the entire summary. And if I'll click on that option again, I'll be back to security recommendation. So let me just come back to remediation action. And this is the one that we have just created. Yeah, you can see it is showing me all the set of information. Now I'll come back here and I'll just refresh this. And then as you can see, this particular task is getting listed over here. Now I can click on this. Imagine, let's say if I'm a part of an IT team, I can just go ahead and accept the ownership and then get this particular thing resolved. Okay. Now this is exactly how the entire end-to-end process works for the relation between recommendation and remediation, to be very precise. Okay. Then the moment it will be completed from here, let's say as an end user of IT team, I have just, accepted this and I'm just going to mention some random text here. Then it will show the change. The status is actually changed here. And if I'll refresh this console again, it will be changed. I mean, relate this that everything that you're seeing here is related to the set of options that are available here, and the entire progress will be completed, or let's say will be tracked end to end. So let's say though I accepted and then I completed this as well. Now, if we wait for some time, what will happen? This task that we see over here, which is showing as pending, will be fixed, or the one which is showing as in progress will be completed. Though it takes just, though it takes a couple of minutes, but I'm just refreshing it to see whether it is showing here as completed or not. No, it is still showing as in progress. It will take some time. And then the moment it is completed, or the moment the sync is complete, here also the exact status will be implemented. Now, one more thing that I would like to address here, and that is you have to do, or your IT team has to execute tasks manually. Currently, this entire end-to-end automation is not available. Hopefully, it will be available in the upcoming future. But currently, requesting a remediation action from MDE portal, getting a task created here. But think about this as a real-time experience, that though I'm getting all the information, but there is nothing like, there is no as such option for me to automatically remediate. Okay, now again, there could be n number of reasons why this option is not available. Maybe let's say your machine has to be onboarded to Intune. You cannot do that for any other machine apart from Intune. I mean, just relate this, or have the actual end-to-end idea that if something is not here, maybe it'll come in the future, but this is just for your information that automatic remediation of pushing updates, changes is currently not available. Your IT team has to do it manually. Okay. Now, the next thing that I would like to talk about is how to report inaccuracy, which can be done at three different levels: global, device, and software. Now, let's say you are getting a recommendation over here, but you're sure that this is something which doesn't even apply to your organization, or let's say the software doesn't even exist for which you are getting a security recommendation. Then you can just go ahead and click on report inaccuracy and select any option from here. Now, the same process can also be followed for a specific application and for a specific recommendation that exists for a specific device. So let's say if I go here and click on open software page and then click on security recommendation, and then I'll click on this one. And then if I'll click on report inaccuracy, you will see I'm again getting some options over here. So this is the one which is moreover related to software. Similarly, you can do it for device. So basically, when it comes to report inaccuracy, there are three different ways of reporting a security recommendation and accuracy. The first one is at the global level, then at the software level, which I have just shown you. And then you can actually come or navigate to this particular device section and then report inaccuracy. You can do it from all the three different levels, and the same concept apply for every security recommendation in terms of adding an exception. Okay, so let's say there is a security recommendation wherein it does not even apply to my organization. So what I can do is I can go to security recommendation, and then I'll click on this one, and then I can just go ahead and apply a specific exception. Now, is it a global exception or is it an exception per device group? I can choose any of these options over here, and then the respective changes will be implemented. Now, just for your information, everything that you are adding into an exception is somewhere going to impact your overall score that you get on the dashboard section. Okay. So if I'll click on dashboard, you can see this exposure score is impacted with inaccuracies or with the exceptions that you are adding, to be very precise. Okay, so make sure you keep all these things in mind while working on different set of components and basically improving the overall posture. Okay, so this was precisely everything that you need to know about security recommendation and remediation actions. Just a quick recap: for every weakness, there will be a recommendation action defined, and for every recommendation action, there can be a remediation action that can be requested. Okay. And this particular remediation section is the section that helps you to bridge the gap between IT team and your security team, because your security team can actually directly route the request of tasks to your IT team. And just for your information, these tasks which are getting listed over here, they can be queried with Microsoft Graph API for sure. Now, the reason why I'm keeping the API part on a different video altogether, because this video is already beyond 30 minutes. And the moment we'll start with APIs, I'm going to let you know how you can query everything from different set of APIs, or whether it is the API of the endpoint, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or whether it is the endpoint of Intune itself or Microsoft Graph itself. Okay, so let's talk about a quick summary of what all we have discussed in this video. We have discussed about security recommendation. We have discussed about how security recommendations are listed for softwares and devices. Then how a respective remediation action can be defined for a security recommendation, how to request remediation action, how to add an exception, and how to report inaccuracy. In the next video, we are going to discuss about software inventory. Now, if you think that this channel is helping you to learn anything new, please feel free to subscribe and share this video with your technical community. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.